Hi crew! Today we're going to be talking about dividing one-digit numbers. This is actually a review from our lesson in class today, which was a little bit crazy. So I wanted to get it on video to prove that we are learning our math a little bit differently this year. If I were to have a math division problem like this, I would be able to read this 35 divided by 4. Now to write it out and to solve it, I would write it like this. And the 35 would be here. Now let's talk a little bit about the vocabulary we learned today. I know I said today that this was the house, so the 35 is in the house, but really the vocabulary for this is the dividend. So I do want you to know the correct words, the terminology. I did say today that this number 4 is at the front door, and that is called the divisor. And the answer, which would be on the roof, is called the quotient. Now that is just the beginning of this crazy math lesson where we are going to be talking about these sort of in narrative terms, because sometimes if you're confused about math, I find that narratively talking about it can really help you understand it. So let's get through this large problem I have for you. 6 into 4,369. There we go. We can write it now. I also taught you the steps to dividing today, and it's really important. If you're in the middle of a division problem and you forget what step you're on, you can just follow these. And I said divide, multiply, subtract, and bring down. But I also added a step right here at the end. Now I know I didn't use those terms in class today. I called this dad, mom, sister, brother, and dog checkers. Don't forget dog checkers. And they all live in the house. That's just the beginning of our craziness today. So let's go ahead and begin. We're going to start with our first step, divide. And let's divide 6 into 4. So right off, I know that 6 can't go into 4 because 4 is smaller than 6. So although I did try to divide, I'm going to say it can go in 0 times. Which reminds me, when you're dividing, every number in the house must have a number above it. So that way you know that your problem is complete. Let's go again to the next phase. 6 into 43 this time. So how many times does 6 go into 43? Well, I'm going to think 6 times what would get me closest to 43? And if you are saying 7, you are correct. So I just divided. 6 goes into 43 7 times. Now my next step is to multiply. So I multiply 7 times 6. It's not 43, but it was close. It was 42. And notice I write it right directly below the number I just divided. Now my next step, subtract. I need to subtract 43 and 42, and there's only 1 left over. Now here's the dog checkers part. I have to check to see if this answer right here to that subtraction problem is smaller than the number at the front door, or the divisor. It is, so I can continue on with bring down. I have a number here ready to bring down. And I've finished the first phase. I have to do all the steps over again, starting with this number right here. So I will divide 6 into 16. How many times does 6 go into 16? Well, it goes in 2 times. So I have divided. Now it's time to multiply. 2 times 6 is 12. And notice I write it directly beneath it. You have to be very careful to keep everything lined up. The next step is to subtract. 16 take away 12 is 4. Dog checkers. I have to check to see if the number I just subtracted here is smaller than the number at the door. It is, so it's time for me to bring down. Again, I've asked that you draw these arrows to keep your numbers lined up. It's really important that you write carefully when you're dividing. Time to do all the steps again. So I start back up with dividing. 49 divided by 6, or another way to say that, 6 times what gets me closest to 49? Well, we know that that's 6 times 8 is 48. That's the closest I'm going to get. So I just did my division. My next step is multiply. 6 times 8 is 48, and I write it directly beneath right here. My next step is to subtract. 9 take away 8 is 1. That's all that's left. Dog checkers, is this number smaller than the number at the door? It is. Is there anything left to bring down? Nope, there's not. At this point I ask, does every number in the house have a number above it? And it does. So that means the problem is over. I have 1 left over. So I would write that with a little r standing for remainder 1. Now I know you think the problem's over, but in my class you have to check your work. And this leads us to the craziest part. So to check your work, you take the quotient and you multiply it by the divisor. So as we said in class, you take the number on the roof times it by the number at the door. So I would go ahead and multiply. 6 times 8 is 48. Carry the 4. 6 times 2 is 12. Plus 4, 16. Carry the 1. 6 times 7 is 42. Plus 1 is 43. But you have a remainder of 1, so you have to remember to add the remainder in. 8 plus 1 is 9. I bring down the 6. I bring down the 3. I bring down the 4. And here we go, folks. Voila! Ici, là, dans, chez moi. I know it's the crazy part. It goes like this. Say it with me. Voila! Here it is. Ici, là, dans, chez moi. Stands for, ta-da, here it is, in my house. And folks, that's all it takes to long divide.